Inspired by FM Kirby, entrepreneurial spirit, and philanthropy, and with a mission to foster self-reliance and support strong, healthy communities, we get excited by helping nonprofits nurture and sustain the entrepreneurial spirit that helps them solve problems and help people. We are proud to have partnered with CASE, the Center for the Advancement of Social Entrepreneurship, at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business for the last 4 years in the implementation of our Kirby Impact Prize. So when we sought for ways to help our grantees and the larger social impact community learn about fueling an innovation engine within their organization, we knew that CASE represented the perfect partner. We are so excited to learn alongside you over the next 4 sessions, starting today with foundations of scaling and innovation, plus an opportunity to see the concepts in action through the work of the Hill Learning Center. As you have questions, please submit them in the Q&A, which CASE will moderate. So thank you for being here with us, wherever you are calling in from, and for all you do to advance the common good. I'll turn it over now to Erin Warsham, Executive Director of CASE, to get us started.
Thank you so much, Justin. Of course, thank you for the lovely welcome to today's session, but more importantly for the, as you said, 4 years of continued partnership with the FM Kirby Foundation and the Foundation's commitment to supporting and helping scale social impact. As Justin mentioned, this is the first session in a 4-part series on innovating to scale. In each of the 4 sessions that are to come, we plan to start each session with an introduction, where we'll offer some best practices and frameworks from our research here at CASE, and then have a conversation with a featured impact leader that can offer insights from actually doing the work of innovating to scale. What went right? What went wrong? What advice do they want to share with each of you that are interested in innovating on your path to scale? In today's session, we are going to start with some of the fundamentals related to innovating to scale. So let me jump in and kick off with a story. I want to start with a story about one of our amazing social enterprises that we work with, One Acre Fund. In 2006, One Acre Fund was founded to help smallholder farmers, mostly in Africa, grow more food, increase their yields, and earn more money. They started in Kenya, reaching smallholder farmers with a bundle of critical farming inputs. Think about seed and fertilizers, as well as financing to help the farmers pay for and afford these farming inputs, and then training to allow the farmers to understand how best to use the inputs and increase their yields. So a bundle of inputs, financing, and training for farmers, all of which was delivered through One Acre Fund's own staff, a cadre of trained field officers. In their first year, in 2006, One Acre Fund reached 38 farmers and their families. By year 4, One Acre Fund was already serving 31,000 farmers. And by 2020, 14 years after being founded, they had served over 1 million. Incredible progress. And such an incredible story about scaling in the social impact space. But for One Acre Fund, they knew that they had more to do. And they wanted to know how close they were getting to the size of the problem that they were hoping to serve and solve. And that size of the problem for One Acre Fund was actually 50 million smallholder farmers, and that was just in sub-Saharan Africa alone. They knew that if they wanted to be able to meet more of the magnitude of this problem, they would have to think about leveraging their assets in new ways, and they have. So over several years, they've been testing and refining innovative ways to scale their impact. Of course, they've continued to grow their core business, that farmer bundle I talked about, and the staff that were helping bring it and sell it to farmers. They've tested and iterated improvements and small innovations to that core model to help that grow and scale. But they didn't stop there. They also thought about, tested, piloted, innovated around different approaches to scale, training government agricultural officers to improve their support of smallholder farmers so that One Acre Fund didn't have to hire everyone on staff. They could leverage existing workforces and help train them. They worked with private sector companies to strengthen seed markets. They advocated for policy change to help improve smallholder farmers' yield and incomes, and so much more. One Acre Fund realized that their initial solution, while very successful, wouldn't scale at the rate that they needed to reach that magnitude, that 50 million farmers that they hoped to serve. And so they took a step back and thought about, how can we cross that gap? How can we provide more impact and innovate to get there? And I know many of the organizations that we work with, and likely many of you on this call, are keenly aware of that gap that exists between the current efforts that you're pursuing and the scope of the problem that you're trying to solve. And so we're here today and in this series to talk about narrowing that gap between current efforts and this problem we're hoping to solve and serve. So in this series, we want to talk about how innovation is a tool that can help scale our impact to narrow that gap. I want to take a quick pause here to say a couple things. One, already I hope your wheels are turning for those of you in the audience. And I want to challenge you to think about, just as One Acre Fund did, what's the size of the problem that you are seeking to serve and solve? And where are your current efforts compared to that problem? What's the gap in between? As you think about that through this session and the ones to come, what we'll continue to do is provide some frameworks and learnings around how to help narrow that gap using innovation as a tool. But we need to start with just some grounding in our terms and language that we'll be using. So first and foremost, let's unpack what we mean by scaling impact. Now, here in a business school at Duke, when we talk about scaling, we're often thinking about traditional businesses, traditional enterprises, where scale usually means selling more widgets, more products, opening new storefronts, all with the goal of increasing profits. But all of you on this call know that for impact enterprises, it's different. Maximizing profit is not the goal of what we're trying to scale. The goal isn't even necessarily, selling more widgets or opening more storefronts or locations. For impact enterprises, the goal is about increasing impact. And while this might mean growing and selling more widgets and opening more locations, it also likely includes other ways to leverage your assets to achieve more impact. So to give an example, as we saw with One Acre Fund, if they had been centering their core solution, those farmer bundles, they would have continued selling more bundles to reach more shareholder farmers in geographic areas, but at a rate that barely scratched the magnitude of the need. So instead, they thought about that gap. They centered the impact they were trying to achieve and the magnitude of the problem, and thought about how can we innovate and try different approaches to scale that could reach dramatically more farmers. Okay, so that's scaling impact. Now let's unpack our other word, innovation. Innovation is one of the most common buzzwords I know here in a business school, and I'm sure for all of you, how many of our websites talk about innovation or our grant proposals to funders. But often what we find is that not everybody's talking about innovation in the same way. So for us, and in this series, by innovation, we don't mean invention. though that's often what people think about. We often think about the light bulb moment, the iPhone, the new splashy, shiny things that have been invented from whole cloth, created out of nothing, completely new to the world. But we don't see innovation as lightning in a bottle. Innovation is actually about new and better ways of creating value. And that often means through systematic experimentation and thoughtful learning throughout the entire life cycle of your organization. So there's lots of ways that you can innovate and think about innovating. And as I said, through this series, we'll provide some frameworks that we think might be helpful as you approach innovation. For today, we want to give you one that we like. It's a framework from Bain and Bridgespan called the Engine 1, Engine 2 concept. So think about those engines of an airplane. Your engine 1 is your core model. For One Acre Fund, that's their farmer bundle and their field officers selling those in the field. That engine 1, that core model, it's not static, it's not stagnant. You do need to continuously improve and incrementally innovate. For One Acre Fund, how can we create new seeds, improve our training programs to make that model even more effective? The engine 2 that you can think about is the more disruptive innovation that often builds off your core assets from engine 1, but allows you to think about new pathways for scaling your impact. Again, in the One Acre Fund example, we saw this. Their engine 2s that they innovated and experimented with were all the things we talked about: training the government workers, policy change, working with seed companies, etc. So we love using the One Acre Fund as an example of a nonprofit social enterprise that is working to innovate and scale. But it's a huge global organization, and we want to make the point that innovating to scale can also occur regardless of your impact area or your impact goals or your scope of local, regional, or global reach. So one more example I want to give is from an enterprise in a different impact area, operating on a smaller scale than One Acre Fund. We're going to talk a little bit about the Hill Learning Center, an FM Kirby Foundation grantee, and also our guest for today's session. Now, the Hill Learning Center was founded in 1977 right here in Durham, North Carolina, as a half-day school to provide intensive research-based small group instruction and support for students with learning differences. Over time, it expanded to include tutoring, summer programs, partnerships to provide training, coaching, and support for educators outside of the Hill School. These efforts were all driving towards Hill Center's big vision that they wanted to achieve alongside others. All students with learning differences and attention challenges receive the instruction and support they need, regardless of where they attend school or whether they have a formal diagnosis. So as the leadership of the Hill Learning Center thought about scaling, they could have centered their core current model, doing more tutoring, perhaps opening up another one of these half-day school locations. But instead, they focused on the big vision, the big problem that they are hoping to help solve. Centering that problem and the vision, the gap we were talking about before, allowed them to see that in addition to continuing to support and grow their core model, their engine 1, there were also ways in which they could innovate around an engine 2 to help meet the magnitude of need. So with that as context, I want to jump from that story into a conversation with our guest today, Beth Anderson, who is the executive director of the Hill Center. Welcome, Beth. Take yourself off mute and join me here. How are you doing today, Beth?
I'm great, Erin. And I just want to thank you and Case and also Justin and the Kirby Foundation for putting together the series and inviting me to participate. It's an honor and a privilege to be here.
Our pleasure. We're so glad to have you here. And I know for the audience, there's going to be so many useful lessons, hopefully some useful things already from what I've said, but this is our chance to be in conversation, to talk more about what this actually looks like. It's easy for me to put up some slides and talk about some frameworks. It's much harder to actually do them in practice. And so thank you for your willingness to share your lessons learned. So Beth, I'd love to start with some grounding. You've shared with me that you were actually hired by the Hill Center initially to help them scale. That was your mandate, help the Hill Center scale their impact. Tell us a little bit more about why Hill was trying to scale. What did that even mean, and what were the motivations?
Yeah, so the motivations started well before me, and there were really two primary motivations for scale: mission impact and financial impact. And that had been consistent really since 1998, when 20 years into our founding as Hill, Hill had spun out and become its own nonprofit, driven by the board's desire to extend beyond these walls behind me and reach many more students, right? They knew that they were doing something really, really special, kind of like 1 Acre Fund with their core model and is having a transformative impact on students, but they felt a moral imperative to reach more students and recognize they could only serve so many directly. They were always looking for ways to reach students given the magnitude of the need, right? 1 in 5 individuals struggle with learning and attention challenges. So that meant there was a student with LD in every single classroom and every single school. So how could Hill have an impact on that problem? I was hired 10 years ago specifically because I had national experience with scaling. I was a senior leader at Teach for America, which at the time was the fastest growing nonprofit in the country, scaling across the country. So I was familiar with strategies for scaling impact. And Hill had tried a lot of different models before I got here, and had recently actually won a national business plan competition for scaling social impact to grow a reading program that we'll talk about in a little bit. So it's that mission impact that was the grounding and honestly what drew me to this job, what drew me to Hill in the first place. But there was also the financial piece, which was really, really important. Our core, our flagship program, is a small half-day school with a 4-to-1 teacher ratio. That is very expensive and a very challenging financial model. And so the board saw innovation and scale as ways to bring in more revenues and hopefully subsidize the core a bit so that we could increase teacher compensation without significantly increasing tuition so that it didn't become just an elite private school. I'll say one more thing before I close on this segment, is that I think that while the financial imperative was real and still is real, it was a little bit of a false promise and a hope that we would be able to just innovate our way to spinning off tons of revenue, right? When you're talking about scaling social impact, that's very, very hard. And so it's not a silver bullet, but we were always looking for ways to generate both philanthropic and earned revenues and benefit the school as we were trying to scale beyond our core.
I love, there's already so many like golden nuggets within what you just said, really helping drive the point home of the gap between the direct model that you were able to do at the Hill School versus 1 in 5. I did not know that stat. It blows my mind. 1 in 5 with learning and attention difficulties that could use the support of a Hill or something similar. So that gap, and then also, really helping articulate the why for you, for the board, for the Hill Center, about why to engage in innovation. It's really an important point, because I think, again, innovation is this buzzword and everybody's like, oh yeah, we need to innovate. But if we're not really clear on the why, then that innovation can waste a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort without really hitting the points that we want to hit. Innovation is hard and can be distracting from the core work that you're doing. So I appreciate you articulating the why for the Hill Center. And what I heard there were really common things that we hear from other organizations innovating to scale. First and foremost, for impact enterprises, the goal, the why of increasing impact. You talked about the moral imperative of extending beyond your own walls. How can organizations use innovation to increase that impact? The second was about money. I mean, let's be real. That's a real motivation for thinking about innovation. Can innovation help us open new funding streams, get new revenues in, or decrease the costs of what we're already doing? But as you said, not a financial silver bullet to be had there. I'm still searching for the financial silver bullet for all impact work. And then the last things I'll mention just for our audience, again, that why of innovation for scale, so important. Impact drivers, financial drivers. We also often hear from organizations that there can be an adaptation driver, needing to adapt to new policy or regulatory environments that they're facing, or some change in their market, as well as just opportunities. That sometimes, we all know this, that opportunities come across our plates, a new partnership, a change in the ecosystem that we want to take advantage of, and innovation will help us get there. So thank you, Beth, for articulating those points so clearly for our audience. From there, where I want to go is, clear on the why of innovating. One of the most common questions that we get from there is organizations asking us, how do we identify and assess whether an innovation is worth pursuing? And so can you tell us a little bit more about the different ways that Hill Learning Center had been leveraging its model and assets to increase its impact, and how did you decide to move forward investing in one particular innovation?
Sure. So as I mentioned, Hill had been at this for a while when I got here, right? And we had looked at and actually tested and had a lot of different models going on when I came in. We had replication sites in multiple different cities, even abroad. We had Hill Centers in other locations. We had private schools who were adoption sites who were trying to implement our methods within their schools. We had multiple package programs that we were disseminating in public schools through training teachers in pre-K, writing, math, reading. It was a lot. And we were spread really, really thin. And so it was that last one, the reading program I mentioned before. It was called HillRap, the Hill Reading Achievement Program. And that was what we decided to really double down on. HillRap was a copyrighted, so it was intellectual property, individualized small group reading intervention that had been developed over decades within the Hill School and had also been tested in public schools. And so as we were looking at the different options, we determined HillRap was really far and away the most promising one from both a mission impact and financial impact perspective. On the mission, right, it was a high quality program. It was distinctive. There wasn't another program like it out there. And it was somewhat proven, right? When I was going out, when I first started and went out into schools and talked to teachers, I heard repeatedly, we've never had a program like this. I was a skeptic initially, and it is solved. Oh my gosh, I am able to move students who previously were intervention resistant. They couldn't learn to read. And it's allowing me to individualize my small groups in ways that nothing else has. So we knew there was something distinctive. And we also had, my predecessor had really put a premium on research. And so we had a few research studies that showed promising impact, not like quasi-experiment, not full-scale RCT, but enough evidence of promise that this could work in public school districts. So we knew we had something special. We also had one key leader already in place, and this was our director of technology. And HillRap is a really complicated program that required a lot of paper and a lot of moving pieces. And he's a unicorn, and he really knew that this program was right for technology. We weren't talking about ed tech for the sake of ed tech, but actually infusing technology into HillRap would make it easier to adopt, easier to scale, and easier to demonstrate impact. And so we thought that that was something we could build upon. We also, to the financial piece, we saw revenue and fundraising potential, right? Ed tech is sexy, technology is sexy, reading is a really core important thing. So there was something we thought we could raise some money around this and had this kind of bright new shiny object.
I love that. Impressive that there were some, you mentioned replication sites and working with private schools to adopt the model and multiple programs beyond HillRap, which also I just love the name HillRap, but multiple programs, not just the reading, but also math, writing, etc. So clearly a culture of, as you said, over decades of testing and identifying and iterating new innovations to your model. And then really helpful to hear you, talk about why that won, right? And again, really consistent themes. So for, the organizations that are on the call, as you think about looking at innovation opportunities within your organizations, there's a lot of ways that you can assess and decide on which one. It's definitely individual to the organization and your needs. But Beth, through your story, I definitely heard some of the most common ones, some of the most common criteria for assessing and moving an innovation forward. Certainly first and foremost, impact. Will this innovation create better and more impact for the people that we're trying to serve? And so your example of saying that the teachers or the students who are the hardest to move were being positively impacted by this program. I also heard you talk about from the teacher side, the demand or the desirability for that innovation. We can innovate all day long, but if nobody actually wants to use the thing that we're innovating around, for 1 Acre Fund, if they were like, oh, we should train government agricultural officers, but the government did not want to do that, not an innovation that they should actually move forward with. And so really hearing that come through clearly with you, that criteria of demand or desirability. Yes, the teachers wanted to use it, wanted more. And as you said, you knew you had something special with that. And then last, what I heard you say is around I guess what I'll call feasibility. Can we really make it work? And so for Hill, that was, do we have the right people? That special unicorn you talked about? And do we see a path to being able to fund this and attract capital to make it scale? So really helpful to have you talk through that. I'm also trying to look through, we've got so many interesting questions that are popping up. So I'm trying to decide whether to bring them in now or wait till other points in the conversation. All right, I'm going to wait on some of these because I think we'll touch on these topics. So let me move forward to next question from me as we're going down this story. I actually want to kind of jump to the end of the story. So would you jump to the end and briefly tell us what happened with HillRap so that we're not like holding our breaths, waiting for the ending. And then we'll loop back and talk about some of the lessons learned, including addressing some of these questions I'm seeing pop up.
Sure. So over almost a decade, so over almost 10 years, we raised a lot of philanthropy to fund it. We built an earned revenue stream to go along as we were doing that. And most of all, we tested, we iterated, and we developed what I would call a tech-enabled HillRap, right? So we evolved, we innovated the product significantly. And ultimately, we actually were able to sell it to a mission-aligned for-profit social enterprise who could take it to the next level, who could really take it nationally. So we grew it to, when we sold, we were serving schools and students in 8 different states, and we were reaching about 10,000 students a year, which was significant for this little school in Durham, North Carolina. But we sold it to someone we thought could really take it to the next level. Let me be clear that selling the program was not our goal from the outset, and really not our goal up until the moment that we had an offer, right? Our plan had been to scale through strategic partnerships. At first, research and development and implementation partners. And then once we had reached a certain point, we knew that we'd need more advanced technology and more sophisticated sales and distribution partners because that was well beyond our core competencies. But when we connected with our acquirer, they made it really clear that they loved our program, that they were building an ecosystem of programs that ours fit into perfectly. And they wanted to work with us, but they were only interested in a straight acquisition. And so after a lot of deliberation, we went ahead with the sale. So with that sale, it's had a pretty, profound impact on our organization. First of all, we're going to better ensure that HillRAP will have the broad impact that we wanted, right? In this first year, so we sold in January of 2023. So we're just over a year into this. They're in their first year of really selling and managing it nationally. And it's already grown from the 8 states where we had small footprints to 28 states and growing. So we are seeing growth. We also, really importantly, since we hadn't been planning to sell, we were trying to figure out how do we make this work from a mission impact standpoint for us, right? We were able to maintain our rights, and we had a very complex negotiation, but a very collaborative negotiation, because they really were mission aligned, that allows us to continue to use the program, within all of our core programs at no cost, and also to continue to sell it locally and to support it locally and to work with our deep local partners. And we also did receive an infusion of capital from the sale that allowed us to shore up our balance sheet enough to pay off debt on the building that is behind me, which we had been struggling to pay for, honestly, to replenish our capital and financial aid reserves, and to give us some space to do some organizational pivots to figure out what is next for Hill. So I think it was a happy ending. The ending, but it's still ongoing. We still have a collaboration services agreement with them. We're still there. And that was the quick and dirty. There were lots of challenges, lots of oh my moments, and sleepless nights along the way.
I'm sure that the process of finding the partner, negotiating with them, dealing with the, what rights do we own versus you, I'm sure that took a little bit more than the 3 minutes you just talked about it for. So congratulations on that. I think it's definitely a happy ending. The point you made about the scale that already has been able to be accomplished through the acquirer is incredible. So congratulations on that. I want to spend time, obviously in that journey, lots of lessons learned. And, what I'm excited about in this series is the opportunity to really have a conversation with a leader that is innovating to scale, to say, like, it doesn't always go according to the playbook. There's lots that I wish I had done differently, or that I would, give advice to someone to do differently. So I want to spend a good chunk of time digging into some of those key lessons learned. I'm actually going to start with one of the questions that's popped up. So we've got a great question from Marshall. Thank you, Marshall, who I think is reflecting back to the beginning of our conversation, where you spoke of different innovations that were existing within Hill Center, replicating the model, working with private schools to adopt it, reading, writing, math programs, etc. And that from that, you looked at some criteria and decided HillRAP was the one that you were going to invest in and move forward with. And so I think Marshall's question is getting at the ones that didn't move forward. How did you think about saying no?
Yeah.
How did you, work with the staff, the board members, to either close a program or just say we're not, maybe we're not closing it, but we're not investing in this program? Because as Marshall says very eloquently, that can be stressful and a barrier to change.
Excellent insight and question, Marshall, and definitely was one of the biggest, especially cultural challenges in leading change. And so just to give, a few examples of when I feel like I was strong and when I kind of also compromised. I looked at the replication site. So when I started, we actually had six replication sites that were independent affiliates of Hill, replicating the Hill Center. I would characterize most of them as fledgling. And I decided I was going to shut them down. I was like, they're a brand risk. It's a distraction. We're really not supporting them. We're really not managing quality. And I then met with the founders and the directors of all of those. And it was a lot harder to be the hard guy and to be the business minded. These were people who, like at Hill, had poured their own heart and soul and had champions and such. So what we ended up deciding to do is we stopped replicating, but we did not shut down any of the sites themselves. They were independent. We made some changes to make sure we were mitigating any risks to us and some shifts. And 3 of them have gone out on their own, have gone out of business on their own, and 3 are still going. And I did make sure when we sold that I actually had some protections for those 3 as part of the package. So I'd say, you know, that was one example. The other thing that I will just name, and this is something we're actually pivoting to address now, by going all in on reading and going all in on that, I'd say our math curriculum and our math program has suffered. We haven't invested in it as much. And that's created, we have a lot of math faculty whose passion is math, right? That's what, and they're like, all we talk about is rap, all we talk about is reading. Why are all the resources going into reading? And, you know, that's part of some of the pivoting that we're going to be doing now, because we just couldn't, we stopped our early learning program. We stopped offering Hill Math. Writing, we tried to weave into rap. So we made some hard decisions, and there were costs to those decisions. And now we're also kind of going back and filling in some of the gaps. So it's hard.
Absolutely. You know, hard to bring, as you said, like the hard sort of business decisions versus the reality of these are schools and kids that need this support. So yes, it logically makes sense to shut them down, but how do we do that at the sake of the impact on these kids' lives that we're trying to have? So the real challenges, it's one of the reasons I love social enterprise, impact enterprise work, is because I think it's more challenging than traditional work. You're dealing with a lot more, you know, higher stakes. So it's real life. And so I love Marshall's question and your answer to that, Beth. And it also underscores the point that even as you're innovating with Hill Rap, if things weren't always going according to plan, you were having to continually iterate, adapt, adjust. And so I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. I talked earlier about this misperception of innovation equaling the light bulb moment, the invention, but really we know that innovation is about this process of iterating constantly and adapting and thoughtful learning as you go. It sounds like that was definitely true for Hill, right? So talk to us a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'd say there was a light bulb moment before I got here, and that was Justin, our Chief Technology Officer, and one of our board members who kind of saw that potential for technology with this program. But beyond that, they saw it. That was the easy part, right? It was the execution and the iteration of it. And I would just say iteration was the key, right? Like that is how we approach this from day one. And we thought about both how do we iterate the product and the program, the what of what we were scaling, but also the how, right? Our approach to scaling. It was a constant back and forth and iteration on both sides, while always making sure that we were staying true to the why, which was that mission impact of reaching more students and financial impact of generating financial benefits to Hill without putting too much financial strain or stress on Hill. And so, I mean, iterating around the what meant refining and testing our program constantly. We had this great program. It had already been being tested and refined. We already had that culture. That was something I did not have to work on. We did have to convince our teachers to move from paper pencil to technology, and these were 30-year veterans. That was hard. But once we started to apply technology to it and teachers saw what it was, we were able to use our school as a learning lab, right? Our teachers could give us immediate feedback and test and refine the product constantly. But just as important, we also already had some dedicated teachers in the public schools and a couple of districts who were really invested, and they were our learning lab outside of Hill. Because if we had just built this within Hill and within our private school environment, it would never have been fully successful and fully adopted within a public school context. So it was really crucial to have both. So that was how we kind of iterated on the what. And I mean, it was a live chat, right? I mean, it was just constantly going. On the how, we just had to remain really nimble and strategically opportunistic. I use that phrase a lot. We're going to be strategically opportunistic in our approach. For each stage of thinking about how we could take a step forward and then build on that and go to the next stage, we didn't know where this path was leading. Like, we did not know, but we knew we were building towards a bigger vision and bigger impact. And so as one example, right, we thought about how to get the technology developed. So first we raised funds and we contracted a firm to develop the prototype. They were great. We got that off the ground. Then we realized this was going to take constant upgrades and constant support. And so we actually found a pro bono corporate partner, a large global company that's based here in the Triangle that we networked to, and they took us on as a pro bono partner. Then they decided to eliminate that division. And so we actually hired someone from their team to come in-house and become a software developer. Whoever thought we would have a software developer on staff at Hill? And then we eventually extended that capacity through a partnership with a social enterprise that trains migrant populations to do technology. And we were able to kind of have a real nice mission alignment and extend capacity. But we were constantly, right? The constant that was there was our chief technology officer for that particular example, but how we got the work done beyond and around him and all other tech capacity, it was flexible. It could grow and scale back as our needs changed at different stages. And it always was aligned with the resources that we had in hand at the time.
Fantastic. And, such a good example of, never thought you would have a software engineer within that building behind you, right? But the evolution of how you thought about the IT tech development side of pro bono resources, a contractor, right? Like this idea of, as you're innovating, sort of ooching. It's a word that our one of our case senior fellows, Dan Heath, uses all the time.
Yeah.
How do you ooch forward? How do you take the next step? Not the, where you think we want to do this hill wrap thing, let's immediately hire the software engineer that we're going to need. But how do we start to sort of test and make smaller investments and build on those as we have the traction and the momentum? So really great example there. There are such good questions. I'm so excited about the questions that you all are submitting. And there's a couple that talk, allude to the people side of this work. And I know you and I have talked a lot about how important the people are within the innovation journey that you have been on. So tell us a little bit more about the importance of the people you engaged and some lessons learned there.
Yeah, I mean, right, it's the old thing, like you've got to have the right people on the bus, and they've got to not only be on the bus, but be in the right seats on the bus. And I would just, so that's absolutely critical. I mean, I've already talked about our chief technology officer. That was, so critical. And there were other key roles that were essential to moving this forward. We couldn't have done it without the right chief technology officer, the right CFO, eventually the right software developer, and the right sort of professional development team that was growing and evolving along with this. And that took change, right? I had to outsource, I had to kind of turn over some folks and change roles. People had to be flexible and grow into new roles or move it or exit the organization and bring in different pieces. And I just think that, disruptive innovation does require replacing people, evolving roles, evolving structures, being nimble, and upsetting the apple cart a bit. I'd say the other thing that I really learned along the way is the importance of both the board and your external partners. And so at the board level, it was really, really important to reshape our board throughout this process and make sure that you had the right people on the board while not alienating the old guard and the folks who were most invested in the core, and kind of striking that balance. And I also had my informal kitchen cabinet, right? The board members who really, it wasn't so much the boardroom presence as my ability to call them And these were folks who had expertise in finance and entrepreneurship and negotiations and strategy, in education, right? In different pieces, in reading. I'd say the piece that really was critical, and ultimately how we actually got to an acquirer, though, was having the right partners and collaborators, right? You can't build all the expertise internally. You can't build all the capabilities and all of the different things. So I mentioned the software, that's obviously was a huge piece of it, but we also had partners and collaborators with school districts, with schools, with experts in reading who we were doing work with, who were kind of part of our R&D, with an instructional designer who overhauled our entire training program. And what was really, really key, and they're still invested, those folks is getting those folks to be as invested in your mission and your goal as you are, so that they really genuinely feel part of your team, and they are championing, and they are often willing to do things for below market rate, or to volunteer their time, or to make that extra call, or to make that connection. So it's, people is key. I'll say one more thing and then see if there are follow-up questions. But, I think on the people side, that's also where, back to some of this cultural tension, and I think the tension that can exist between, particularly if you have an engine 1 and an engine 2, which we really didn't know at the time, but kind of did. And hindsight, I definitely could have done a much better job internally, being really, really just clear about the role of engine 1 and the role of engine 2, and the different roles and structures and cultures across them. Because I had come in to a very fractured organization for different reasons and had adopted this mantra of all Hill. And my goal was to unify us and have us all charging towards that big vision statement you saw at the beginning. But really, as we innovated and scaled HillRap, we became more and more fractured and more distinct. And I think, I understood how it all fit together, but most people did not. And it could feel overwhelming, it could feel forced, it could feel it could confusing, and could just create tensions. It was hard on the team that was leading RAP, because they were the outliers, they were like the skunkworks team. And then it also created tensions at our leadership team level at times, because not everyone was involved in, or candidly as invested in, what we were doing on the RAP scaling project.
I think it's such a nice open reflection of something that you wish you had done differently, and the tensions that existed within the organization by people that were invested deeply in the work of Hill, but maybe didn't understand how this piece fit into their work or aligned with their objectives. I think that gets to the answer to, Rachel has a great question in the Q&A of, do you have any regrets going all in on one program? And I think that is part of the answer to that, of regrets about handling the overlap of the time and investment being put into that one program versus the other. Is that, not to answer for you?
I do. I think that's fair. And it goes back even to the underinvestment in math. I wish there had been a way that we maybe could have balanced a little bit more, but I also, when I've kind of had a little time to reflect now and look back on things, there were some hard decisions. There were some decisions that people didn't like that I wished I could have maybe done differently, but I'm not sure we would have gotten where we were trying to go if I had. And so I think it's a trade-off. But I would say managing the people and the culture, and not just the tensions, but even within the team, I took a team of educators and turned them into an entrepreneurial little mini business. And that was hard, right? And there were tears, and there were hard moments, and there were, so I look back at certain conversations and ways I presented things, and I think slowing down, listening more, sticking to my beliefs and my vision and sort of where we were going. But I think, communicating with folks could have done better at times. But no real regrets on going all in on HillRap, because I do believe it was the right innovation for scale.
Let me jump on one last topic for lessons learned. Risk. So you know, to that point of investing a lot of time and resources into Hill Wrap and scaling that and eventually selling it. Anytime we're taking on new approaches or trying to be innovative, there's risks that come with that. Regardless of how thoughtful we're being, there's always going to be risks. So briefly, what were some lessons learned about knowing what the risks would be and planning for them?
Yeah. So I think a few things, you know, one, to do this work and to really go all in on not just innovation, but trying to scale innovation, you've got to be comfortable with taking on some risk, right? And kind of making peace with the unknown, right? That you're not going to know the path. And I think the way I tried to manage those risks was a couple of things. You know, one, you know, being clear on what you will not do to the conversation, you know, and sticking to that, and knowing what you don't do. But we also, every time we made a major pivot or took a major next step or something, we were always clear to make sure that if things suddenly went awry, like we had a path to a soft landing, right? And we almost took that path more than once, including right up to like the month before we found our eventual acquirer. I was starting mentally to shift to what's the soft landing going to be, because I don't think we're going to find the right partner to do what we thought we were going to. And so,
what would, out of curiosity, what would that soft landing have been?
yeah, so it was I think gonna be a scale back, right? And a scale back to kind of right size our ambitions, and to figure out a way to really manage Wrap in a just more contained way, that was not trying to scale, that was just trying to sustain, probably with a core group of existing clients, kind of where we landed after the, you know, a core group of clients. But my real thing about managing the risk was I did not want to put our core programs or our reputation at risk, right? Like those were the two important things, to be really, really clear that we're not doing anything that will put our school and our core at risk or our reputation at risk as we do that. And so it was kind of a thoughtful unwinding was going to be painful to our people who would be impacted, but not kind of have these other ripple effects.
And I love that as a risk mitigation strategy of like, what are the guardrails? What are the things that have to remain true and that cannot be impacted? And holding those at the core as you go, and that idea of what's the plan B? What is the soft landing if we need to pull the parachute cord? You know, when do we do that, and where are we trying to land? So very helpful there. Very quick question here from Neo on the risk side. His question is, what did the journey for previous philanthropic funders look like? When you sell, you know, there's a risk of you sell this to an acquirer. The previous funders are like, you know.
Yeah. Fortunately, the FM Kirby Foundation and other funders were actually quite supportive, and quite excited about the opportunity, because again, it really, we hit the jackpot. We found the right acquirer, right? And we were able to authentically make the case that both you invested in this project and you invested in this product because you wanted it to reach more people, and this is the best way for it to reach more people. And we were also able to articulate how we were going to be able to continue to use the product to pursue our own mission, right? And so I think the other key, and I'm glad the questioner, you know, brought the funders into the question, right? We had lots of different funders, both individuals and corporate and philanthropy, and some were our long-standing, long-term funders. Some were just one time for this product, you know, as a range. But for those long-standing ones who we wanted to also make sure we sustain no matter what, we kept them very close, right? And we communicated consistently around our plans, our projects, you know, where we were going, what the risks are. And I'd say in the last few years, when we really started to go on this steeper scaling trajectory, we were very proactive in trying to like name the risks, right? And what our risk mitigation tactics were. So we brought our funders along because they really were the partners in this work.
It's an incredible story. And I know from having spoken with you that it was a long and tough journey, but certainly one that has now allowed for the acquirer to take the Hill Wrap tool and expand it and grow it in ways that an ed tech company can versus a school, learning program. So really a lot of excitement about the scale that will be reached that has come out of that engine 2 innovation from your team. And I know, just to sum up the story for our audience, that what's going to come next for all of you at Hill Center is kind of doubling down on your core mission and taking the financial resources that came through that sale and the learnings about what Hill's core competencies are around delivering instruction and training people, et cetera, to not necessarily find the next Hill Wrap. I don't think anybody's anxious to do a new tool and tech solution and sell that. But to continue to meet the needs in the local community and deepen the impact for Hill's work. And I know that you've said to me before, like, we're going to still keep innovating. There's an R&D budget. We're going to continue to do that work to focus on deepening our impact locally and innovating our existing programs. So just a incredible story and insights to share with everyone here. Beth, let me give you one moment. Do you have one, parting piece of advice or anything that you'd like to share before I take the last 3 minutes to wrap up?
Thanks for that opportunity and for this opportunity, Erin. I guess I just leave you with kind of one quote and a commentary. One of my favorite quotes is that chance favors the prepared mind by Louis Pasteur. And I really believe that luck plays into any innovation and success. And we are able to cultivate our own serendipity and create our own luck. So we got lucky many times along the way. This could have been a different outcome and a different story and a different things. But I think what was really important is that we persevered, we acted boldly, and we really did create our own luck so that we were always ready to be strategically opportunistic, right? When that door opened, we were ready. So I would just say, if you're on this journey, be bold, persevere, and create your own luck, and doors will happen and great things will ensue.
I love that. Fantastic, Beth. Thank you so much. I know we can't see the people that are on the webinar, but I know that everybody is, shaking their heads in agreement and clapping along, but we really appreciate your willingness to share the Hill and Hill Wrap story and the lessons learned. As we wrap up in the last 2 minutes, I just wanted to put on the screen a few of our initial takeaways from today's session about scaling impact, which means centering the problem and the impact, innovation as a tool to scale, often as an engine to disruptive innovation, the why being critical, and then the lessons learned that we had in the conversation with Beth around assessing opportunities, the right people at the right time, and chance favoring the prepared mind, and much more. What we're going to do here at CASE is we're going to take some more of the lessons and advice that we heard in this last hour and put it together in a 1-pager that we'll send out to all of those that were registered for today, so that you have some of those key takeaways to bring into your work. And I am just thrilled and excited about the conversation that we've had today, and that this is just the first in the 4 sessions that we will be providing over the next few weeks. Our next one is 2 weeks from today, same day of the week, same time of day, May 23rd at noon Eastern. We're going to dive more deeply into people and culture, creating that innovation culture to drive scale. And our featured guest next time will be Maria Kim, who is currently the president and CEO of RedF, and formerly was the executive director of CARA, one of RedF's portfolio organizations in Chicago. So really excited to get to hear from her and share her lessons and advice specifically about culture and people to drive innovation and scale. So again, my gratitude to you, Beth, for joining us, Justin, to you and the team at the FM Kirby Foundation for all of your work. And thank you to all of those in attendance today for your engagement and for the work that you do to solve social and environmental problems all over the world. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Erin.
Of course.